Everyone at Vega Station called it a lost cause, a floating corpse of what was once the pride of the orbital fleet. The Falcon X, RA top-tier, interstellar freighter, capable of cross-galaxy jumps, precision maneuvering in hostile atmospheres, and advanced AI-integrated cargo management. It had survived war zones, pirate raids, and black hole proximity drills. But one warp core rupture during a mistimed mid-jump tore its legacy apart. Since then, the ship had sat abandoned in Dock 9 for nearly a year, lifeless, hollow, and more. A cautionary tale than a vessel. The station brass hired the best, core rebalancers from Titan Forge AI neural lattice engineers from Lunanet, and even a retired phase architect from the Orbital Council. Each team came in with tools, drones, scanners, simulations, and smug certainties, only to leave red-faced and bewildered, blaming irreparable systemic failure or non-recoverable lattice degradation. Eventually, they stopped trying. The Falcon XR was written off, its name turned into a shrug, a punchline in backroom jokes and engineering forums. Then came Rhea Lane. She was barely 19, with no credentials, no mentor recommendations, and no name anyone recognized. She didn't arrive in a transport shuttle or a company pod. She came off a cargo hauler with grease on her cheeks, a duffel full of custom tools, and a stubborn silence that made people uncomfortable. Her application to assist with core diagnostics wasn't even processed. The admin bot flagged it as spam due to her lack of certification. When she tried to join a group of mechanics doing basic hull scans, she was literally laughed out of the bay. One guy even tossing her a burnt-out capacitor as a souvenir. "Go play engineer somewhere else, sweetheart," they'd said, but Rhea didn't argue, didn't shout, didn't try to defend herself, she just observed. For days, she sat near the maintenance windows of Dock 9, sketching out the Falcon's blueprint from memory and long-deleted archives. She charted every burned conduit, every misaligned panel, every structural microfracture visible to the naked eye. Things others either missed or dismissed. While crews moved on to newer, shinier problems, she studied quiet, focused, and relentless. She noticed things the experts didn't, like the faint residue on one side of the warp core casing, suggesting a reverse flux spiral, or the stress warping around the lateral gyros, inconsistent with any typical rupture pattern. She began forming a theory, one no one else would entertain, that the Falcon wasn't destroyed by the jump, it survived it. The rupture hadn't killed the core, it had triggered a failsafe cascade that the ship had tried to override on its own. In other words, the Falcon had fought to live. One night, after the maintenance bay had gone dark and quiet, and the crew had shifted to other sectors, Rhea made her move. She disabled the glitchy perimeter drones, something she done in her sleep, and slipped through the service hatch into the Falcon's dead shell. The air inside was stale, the artificial gravity running at 30%, barely enough to keep her grounded. Shadows moved like ghosts in the emergency lights, and the silence inside was so complete that her heartbeat sounded like drumfire in her ears. She didn't hesitate. She ran a sweep. Not with fancy scanners, but with her own crafted diagnostic NOTA-hacked sensor coil linked to a modded handheld array. Her screen flickered, then bloomed with error codes, and she smiled. She could read them like a language, like a story. The ship wasn't dead. It was speaking in pain. Over the next 72 hours, she didn't sleep. She worked feverishly, surviving on caffeine, chews, and stubbornness. She scavenged parts from discarded drone husks, pulled wiring from forgotten supply closets, and reprogrammed backup subroutines directly into the Falcon's decaying AI core. She wasn't just fixing damage, she was listening. Every bypass, every patch, every line of code she rewrote came from instinct, memory, and a deep understanding of how ships like this wanted to function. She discovered that a key sequence had been misaligned in the original Spexon era, so subtle that no one had caught it in over a decade. That flaw, in a precise moment of gravitational stress, caused a misfire between the warp containment and the inertial dampeners, ripping a microhole in the temporal mesh and making the Falcon XR eat itself from the inside out. But, instead of exploding, the Falcon tried to compensate, rerouting energy, engaging every safety mode it had. The AI likely burned itself out, trying to save the ship. Rhea didn't just patch the system, she honored that fight. She rewired the energy grid to account for dynamic rebalancing. rewrote the core stabilizers with a new subroutine she crafted entirely on the spot, and replaced the AI housing with a repurposed skimmer pilot core she'd modified years ago in a scrapyard. Then came the moment of truth. Her hand hovered over the ignition pad. 1 breath, 1 second. She pressed it. At first, nothing. Then a low thrum soft. At first, like the purr of something waking from a deep sleep. Lights flickered. Then stabilized, the gravity recalibrated beneath her boots. Screens lit up, diagnostics raced across every surface. The Falcon XR was alive, not partially, not halfway alive. Systems stable, power levels optimal. AI core online, responsive, curious. Rhea stood in the center of the once-abandoned cockpit, grime-streaked and sleepless, but alive in a way she'd never felt before. Her fingers brushed the newly lit control panel, and in that moment, the girl no one believed in had done what hundreds couldn't. She didn't say anything. She just looked out the viewport as the ship hummed around her like it was breathing again, like it was waiting for what came next. The next morning, Vega Station awoke to chaos, not the kind born of catastrophe, but the electric, disorienting kind that swept through comes channels and maintenance corridors like a storm no one saw coming. Alarm protocols lit up across 4 decks when Dock 9 registered an unexpected power surge. Station systems detected a core ignition sequence inside the Falcon XR, a ship that had been classified as a cold, dead shell for over a year. Techs scrambled from their quarters, half-dressed, half awake, stumbling into corridors while emergency override teams were dispatched before anyone could process what was happening. Commander Bales, the station's head of engineering, and a man who hadn't raised his voice in 20 years, practically shoved his way through the growing crowd, barking orders and demanding answers. When the bay doors to Dock 9 opened, every breath in the crowd hitched. The Falcon XR stood gleaming under the hangar, lights not repaired, but reborn. Its hull shimmered where previously scorched plating had dulled to ash. Interior lights pulsed in smooth, steady rhythm, and the ship's engines emitted a low, resonant hum that carried the unmistakable signature of a fully balanced warp core. At the helm, through the main cockpit window, stood Rhea Lane, her expression calm, hair tied back in a messy knot, dark circles under her eyes betraying sleepless nights, and a quiet pride rising in her posture like the ship itself was standing taller because of her. She stepped out onto the loading ramp as the crowd parted with stunned silence. Not a soul spoke as she descended. Even Bales, towering and furious, found himself slowed not by caution but confusion. His well-rehearsed speech about security violations and unauthorized access withering under the magnitude of what he was seeing. "What the hell did you do?" he finally asked, voice tight. Rhea looked him in the eye and said simply, "I listened." The words seemed to echo louder than any alarm. She explained only when pressed that the Falcon hadn't been destroyed. It had been trying to survive. The rupture hadn't been total. The AI had fought to contain it, to reroute power, to shut itself down before the failure became fatal. What others saw as system death was actually a kind of cry for help embedded deep within cascading error codes. Everyone else had been too focused on what was missing or broken to understand what the ship was trying to communicate. She had heard it, seen it, and responded not with protocols, but with empathy. Experts, still skeptical, demanded logs. They got more than they bargained. For art, Rhea had documented everything code she'd written in real time. Diagrams of modified circuits, restructured architecture she had rebuilt from scratch. Engineers pored over her makeshift schematics and found brilliance wrapped in scavenged parts. Her rebalanced power cores corrected a flaw none of them had noticed before, one buried so deep in the original design specs it had been accepted as unchangeable, like a scar. But Rhea, unhindered by decades of institutional tradition, saw it for what it was, a mistake waiting to trigger a chain reaction. The flaw, she explained, caused an invisible energy delay during high-gravity warp initiations, imperceptible under most conditions, but catastrophic during edge case jumps, like the one the Falcon had attempted before it went dark. That error had doomed the Falcon. But her fix, handwritten into subroutines and insulated with handcrafted bypasses, didn't just resolve it made the ship stronger. She didn't fix it, one of the senior techs whispered to another in disbelief. She perfected it. The ripple of that truth spread faster than the incident logs. Within hours, Rhea was summoned to the station command deck, where members of the Galactic Mechanics Guild had already begun arriving through remote links and emergency transports. They reviewed her work, cross-checked it against archives, ran simulations, and when they realized what she'd done, the silence was deafening. These were engineers who had devoted decades to warp theory, who'd authored textbooks and taught entire generations, and a 19-year-old girl from a scrapyard had just taught them something no one had seen before. The Guild offered her an honorary Master Engineer rank on the spot. They cited exceptional independent innovation, demonstrated theoretical advancement, and service to fleet recovery operations. She declined, not out of arrogance, but out of something deeper. "I didn't come here for a title," she said. "I came because the ship was still alive, and no one else could see it." The look in her eyes made them believe her. That afternoon, the Falcon XR's systems underwent a full diagnostic under station protocols. Not a single failure was found. Its core registered optimal balance. Its AI responded not only intelligently, but warmly, like a creature grateful for breath after near-death. News of Rhea's success went far beyond Vega Station. Within days, her name traveled across repair yards, research labs, and even black market engineering networks. Some called it a miracle. Others tried to discredit it as a fluke, but none could refute the simple truth. The Falcon XR had returned from the dead, and it had returned better than it ever was because of her. As technicians begged to study the ship, Rhea made her decision quietly. She began prepping the Falcon for departure, not to flee, but to fly. She cleaned her tools, packed her duffel bag, and programmed a new jump route. When Bales found her, standing in the cockpit one last time, hands on the console like it was something sacred, he asked, not unkindly, "Where will you go?" Her answer came with a small smile and eyes bright with purpose. "Out there to find what else the experts got wrong." The bay lights dimmed as she powered up the warp core. This time, it glowed not with strain or desperation, but with quiet confidence. Every system confirmed, every thruster aligned. The Falcon XR vibrated like a heart ready to race. And then, without ceremony, without countdown, the ship lifted, hovered, and vanished into a blur of violet light, leaving behind only a whisper of motion and a legend in the making. Rhea Lane, the girl no one believed in, had not just fixed the impossible, she had redefined what was possible. And somewhere, in the far stretch of stars, a ship once thought dead carried with it the living proof that genius needs no permission. Only a chance. No one believed a girl could fix the Falcon XR until she did what experts couldn't.